I'm Elena Carter, 35, a single mom from Portland, and I never imagined the deepest betrayal would come from my own sister. Rachel and I had been inseparable since childhood. I gave up my own dreams to raise her when our family fractured. After my divorce, I fought my way back, working long hours and saving every dollar until I finally built stability for myself and my daughter, Sophie. I had managed to put aside $72,000, a safety net for college, emergencies, and the life we deserved. Then, in a single moment, it was gone. My accounts were drained. Rachel vanished with her new boyfriend, leaving me shattered. But just as despair threatened to crush me, Sophie, only 8 years old, looked at me with calm, steady eyes and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I handled it." To understand how my little girl ended up being the one to see what I could not, you have to know where it all began. I was only 10 when my parents' marriage shattered, leaving pieces that never fit together again. Dad moved to Denver with his new girlfriend, and Mom drifted into her own loneliness. And then there was Rachel, 7 years old, wide-eyed, still sucking her thumb at night. She didn't understand what had broken, only that everything suddenly felt unsafe. That's when I stepped in. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I couldn't stand the way Rachel clung to me, terrified that if I left, she'd have nothing solid to hold on to. My friends were applying to colleges and daydreaming about dorms. I was cooking pasta for Rachel after school, folding her laundry, attending parent-teacher conferences when our mom forgot. I stopped being just her sister, I became her stand-in mother. Every choice I made circled back to her. I skipped out on applying to the universities I'd once taped brochures of to my bedroom wall. Instead, I took on a job at a bookstore and another waitressing at night. My paychecks kept the lights on, bought Rachel's ballet shoes, and filled our pantry with ramen and discount cereal. The sacrifice was quiet, invisible, just the air we breathed. Rachel thrived, though. She was brilliant in school, made friends easily, joined clubs. I made sure she had every chance I never got. When she needed a new calculator for geometry, I found a way. When she wanted to go on the senior trip, I picked up an extra shift. And when she stood on the stage at her high school graduation, cap tilted, honor cords draped around her neck, my heart felt like it might burst. The night before she left for college, she curled up on my bed, her hair fanned out across my pillow like she had when she was little. "I'm going to pay you back one day," she whispered. "Everything you gave up for me, I'll make it right." I smiled, brushing her hair back. "You don't owe me anything. Just succeed. That's all I want." And I meant it. My bank account was nearly drained after buying her dorm supplies, but seeing her so excited was worth every penny. Rachel hugged me tight, murmuring, "You'll see. I'll take care of you the way you took care of me." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe that all the years I'd spent being her anchor would mean something. But even then, in the dark silence of that room, I felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper I shoved away before it could grow. Because in my mind, sisters didn't betray each other. Sisters kept their promises. Or so I thought. What I didn't know then was that one day, Rachel would hold not just my trust in her hands, but everything I'd ever saved, and she'd let it all slip away. For a while, I believed sacrifice might finally give way to joy. When I was 26, I met Mark Reynolds. He was handsome in that clean-cut, steady sort of way, the kind of man who looked like he had his life together. He worked in IT at a logistics company, wore button-down shirts even on weekends, and had a smile that made me think maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't always have to carry everything alone. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. He asked me questions no one else ever had, what books I liked, what I wanted for myself. It startled me because I wasn't used to anyone looking past my responsible caretaker identity. He leaned in, listening as though my words mattered. For someone like me, starved for attention and recognition, that was intoxicating. Within a year, we were married. When Sophie was born, tiny and perfect with dark hair and my wide brown eyes, I thought I had everything I'd ever dreamed of. Holding her for the first time, I promised her the same thing I had promised Rachel, that I would always be there, no matter the cost. For a time, life felt like a fragile but beautiful restart. Mark and I had a modest little house in Portland. I was working steadily as an office manager, and Sophie's laughter filled the walls with something I hadn't realized I'd been missing all along: hope. Rachel was in college then, coming home for breaks and doting on Sophie like the proud aunt she claimed she always wanted to be. She would walk Sophie around the living room, whispering promises of all the adventures they'd have together. I wanted to believe we were building something solid, a family stitched back together after so much unraveling. But fairy tales don't last forever. Sophie was 3 when I noticed the cracks. Mark's late nights, the way he guarded his phone like it held state secrets, the cologne I didn't recognize on his shirt. At first, I told myself I was paranoid, that being exhausted from motherhood and work had made me suspicious. But then came the lipstick on his collar, the sudden weekends, away for training, and finally, the gut-punch truth: he was having an affair. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor that night, Sophie asleep in her room, my chest heaving with sobs I tried to muffle with a towel. I'd sacrificed so much to create stability, only to watch it crumble again because of someone else's selfishness. When I confronted him, Mark didn't even try to deny it. He said things like, "We got married too young, and you'll be fine on your own." And then he left. Just like that, I was a single mother. Those first months were brutal. Bills piled up, my job barely covered rent and daycare, and I cried so often in the shower that Sophie once asked, "Why is the water so loud, Mommy?" I told her it was because the pipes were old. Rachel came back into my life during that time, moving into our spare room for a while. She said she wanted to help, and in the beginning, it felt like a lifeline. She cooked dinner sometimes, picked Sophie up from daycare if I was stuck late at work, even slipped little drawings under Sophie's pillow to make her smile. "I've got you," she whispered one night as I sat exhausted on the couch. "Just like you always had me." And I believed her. But then, little things started happening. $40 missing from my wallet that I was sure I hadn't spent. Utility bills she swore she paid online but never did, racking up late fees. A credit card charge for an expensive pair of shoes, which she claimed was an error from the store. I confronted her once, my voice shaking, asking if she was taking money from me. Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "How could you even think that? After everything you've done for me, do you really believe I'd steal from you?" I felt ashamed the second the words left my mouth. I told myself I was stressed, paranoid from Mark's betrayal. So I apologized, and Rachel hugged me, whispering that we were a team. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. Over time, Rachel moved out to an apartment nearby. She still came over often, babysitting Sophie, taking her for ice cream, building forts in the living room like I used to for her. Sophie adored her, and I clung to the idea that Rachel was the sister I could still count on. I ignored the inconsistencies, the excuses, the gnawing suspicion that things didn't add up. Meanwhile, I was clawing my way out of survival mode. I worked extra hours, enrolled in night classes, and slowly climbed my way up to a management role. 5 years after Mark left, I finally earned a promotion to operations manager at my firm. The salary increase wasn't huge, but it was enough to breathe. Enough to move us into a safe neighborhood with a modest 3-bedroom house, where Sophie claimed the smallest bedroom with the bay window and declared it her forever room. That house became our sanctuary. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up gasping with financial panic. I opened 3 separate savings accounts, a college fund for Sophie, an emergency fund, and a seed fund for the bakery I dreamed of opening one day. Each month I chipped away, little by little, until I'd saved $72,000. I can still remember the day I hit that number, staring at the bank app on my phone with tears running down my cheeks. It wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that I could rebuild, that all those years of sacrifice and loss hadn't broken me. Proof that Sophie would never have to feel the same insecurity I had growing up. Rachel knew about the money. I didn't hide it from her, because I still believed in her promises. She swore she was proud of me, that one day we'd both live lives that weren't just about surviving. I clung to that vision, blind to the red flags, blind to the shadows already circling. Because the truth was, my life was about to fracture again, and this time, the person holding the hammer wasn't a cheating husband. It was my own sister. And the first crack came in the form of a charming stranger named Ethan. Ethan Cross came into our lives like a storm that looked beautiful from a distance but ripped roofs off when it got close. Rachel met him through some mutual friend, or so she claimed. He was tall, with those sharp blue eyes that made women lean closer without realizing it, and a smile that hinted he knew things the rest of us didn't. When she first introduced him at a family barbecue, everyone laughed at his stories. He knew how to charm a room, how to tilt his head just enough when he listened to make you feel like you were the only person who mattered. But something about him rubbed me the wrong way. It was subtle at first, the way his gaze lingered too long on Sophie, not in a predatory way, but with this calculating curiosity, like he was studying her reactions. Or the way he always positioned himself as the victim in his own tales, jobs lost because bosses were jealous, exes who were crazy, opportunities stolen by people who didn't understand him. Sophie picked up on it immediately. She was only 8, but she had this uncanny ability to sense when someone wasn't who they pretended to be. One night, after Rachel and Ethan left our house, Sophie whispered as I tucked her in, "I don't like him, Mom." "Why not?" I asked, brushing her hair back. "He makes Aunt Rachel cry when he thinks nobody's watching." I froze. "What do you mean?" She bit her lip, clearly afraid she'd said too much. "I just hear them sometimes. He says things that hurt. And she cries." I told myself Sophie must have misunderstood. I wanted Rachel to be happy so badly that I ignored my own daughter's instincts. That's the cruel irony of motherhood. Sometimes, we dismiss the very wisdom our children try to hand us. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Ethan was always asking questions about my job, my house, my accounts. Not directly, he was slicker than that. "Wow, operations manager, that must pay well," he'd say, or, "Bet this neighborhood isn't cheap." When I brushed him off, Rachel would laugh nervously, as if to soften the edge of his curiosity. The tension grew when Rachel started spending more time at my house. She said Ethan's place was noisy, or that they needed a break, and I, wanting to support her, let her crash in our guest room. She convinced me it was temporary, just until they figured things out. I wanted to believe she was still my little sister, the girl I'd raised, the one I'd sacrificed for. One evening, as I packed for a work trip, Rachel lingered in the doorway. "Elena," she said lightly, "you should probably leave your online banking password with me, just in case something comes up while you're gone. What if Sophie needs something? What if the mortgage payment is due and you forget?" The request should have set off every alarm in my body. But I didn't hesitate. Rachel had been part of my life for so long, part of Sophie's life, that trusting her felt natural, automatic. I scribbled the password on a sticky note and handed it to her. She hugged me, pressing her cheek against mine, whispering, "You're the best sister in the world." I wanted that to be true. When I boarded the plane for my work trip, I told myself things were finally settling: a good job, a stable home, Sophie thriving in school, Rachel finding love. For once, I thought maybe the sacrifices had paid off. But Sophie's last words before I left haunted me more than I wanted to admit. She tugged my sleeve at the airport and said softly, "Don't trust him, Mom. Promise me." I kissed her forehead, laughed it off, and told her she was imagining things. What I didn't know then was that Ethan wasn't imagining anything. He already had a plan. And by the time I came home, the life I'd built, every dollar, every sacrifice, would be gone. The work trip went smoothly. 3 days of back-to-back meetings, catered lunches, and long evenings drafting reports in a quiet hotel room. I almost felt proud of myself, stepping into that conference room with colleagues who respected me, knowing Sophie was safe at home with Rachel. For once, I thought I had balance, career, motherhood, and family all working together. That illusion shattered the moment I checked my accounts. It was late on the third night, and I logged into my banking app to transfer money for Sophie's after-school program. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The balance was wrong. Not just a little wrong. Empty. Every account. The college fund. The emergency savings. The seed money I'd spent 5 years building. All of it. Gone. I refreshed the page, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. The numbers didn't change. I checked again, diving into transaction history. Dozens of withdrawals, some direct, others cloaked through transfers I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as reality hit. $72,000. Vanished. I don't remember packing my bag or rushing to the airport. I only remember the hollow ringing in my ears as I stared at my phone, whispering to myself, no, 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 no. Every dollar had a purpose. Sophie's future, our security, the bakery I dreamed of starting someday. Years of sacrifice erased with a few keystrokes. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Sophie was curled up on the couch watching cartoons, her face lighting up when she saw me. But Rachel and Ethan were gone. The guest room told the story. Sheets stripped, closet empty, drawers yanked open. The sticky note where I'd written my banking password was missing from the fridge. My chest constricted so tightly I could barely breathe. I called Rachel's phone. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Sophie asleep upstairs, staring at the bank app as if sheer willpower could bring the money back. I felt stupid, no, worse than stupid. Betrayed. By the very person I had raised, the person I trusted most in the world. The next morning, I went to the police. The officer behind the desk was kind but blunt. Family fraud is one of the hardest cases we see, he said. People hand over passwords, access. It complicates things. He handed me paperwork that felt heavier than bricks. His eyes were apologetic, but his words crushed me. Recovery may not be possible. I stumbled out of the station feeling like the ground had been ripped out beneath me. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that everything you worked for is gone? That the aunt she adored had chosen a man over her own family? That night, Sophie padded into the kitchen where I sat with my head in my hands. She touched my arm gently. Don't cry, Mom. I tried to smile through the tears. I just don't know how we're going to fix this, sweetheart. She tilted her head in that calm, unnerving way children sometimes have, as though she was older than me in that moment. Don't worry, she said softly. I handled it. My breath caught. What do you mean you handled it? Sophie didn't answer right away. She just gave me this look, steady, unafraid. The kind of look that said the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. And in that silence, for the first time since discovering the empty accounts, I felt the smallest flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. When Sophie said those words, "Don't worry, Mom. I handled it." I thought she was trying to comfort me. She was 8 years old. What could she possibly mean? Kids say things like that all the time, usually because they've seen it in a cartoon or heard it in a movie. But when I looked at her face, steady and serious, I realized this wasn't make-believe. I crouched down in front of her, my hands still trembling from the shock of losing everything. Sweetheart, what do you mean you handled it? She glanced toward the stairs as though making sure no one else was listening, even though the house was empty now. Then she whispered, "Come to my room." Her voice carried a weight that didn't belong to a child. I followed her upstairs, my stomach knotted with dread and confusion. She shut the door behind us, climbed onto her bed, and reached under her pillow. When her small hands pulled out her old iPhone, the one I had let her keep after upgrading mine, I felt my heart thud harder. "I've been recording them," she said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze. Recording who? Aunt Rachel and Ethan. She unlocked the phone with her passcode and handed it to me. I didn't like him, Mom. He made her cry, and he asked too many questions about your money. So I started recording when they didn't know. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Sophie had always been curious, always mimicking the detective shows she loved to watch on TV, but this was different. This was my 8-year-old acting on instincts sharper than mine, instincts I had ignored. She opened the voice memos app and pressed play. At first, it was muffled, the sound of Rachel pacing, her voice sharp with frustration. Then Ethan's voice came through, low and commanding. "You promised me the password. She trusts you. This is the only way we'll get enough to start over." Rachel's voice cracked. "She's my sister, Ethan. She's done everything for me." "Exactly," he hissed. "And she'll keep doing it unless you grow a backbone. Do you want to stay broke forever, or do you want a real life with me? This is your shot." I felt the blood drain from my face. The phone nearly slipped out of my hand. Sophie touched my arm, her eyes wide but calm. "There's more." She swiped to another recording. This time it was Rachel sobbing. "What if she finds out? She'll never forgive me." Ethan laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone. She'll get over it. People like her always do." Tears blurred my vision. I shut off the phone, pressing it to my chest as if I could smother the voices I had just heard. My baby, my little girl, had been carrying this knowledge, this burden, while I walked around blind, insisting everything was fine. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I whispered, my throat raw. Sophie shrugged, her face pinched with guilt. "I didn't want you to be mad at Aunt Rachel. You always told me family comes first. I thought maybe if I got proof, you'd have to believe me." Her words cut straight through me. I had dismissed her instincts, brushed off her warnings because I wanted to see the best in Rachel. And my daughter, the person I should have been protecting, was the one protecting me. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her so tightly she squeaked. "You are the bravest, smartest girl I know," I whispered into her hair. "I am so sorry I didn't listen." She hugged me back, whispering, "It's okay, Mom. Now we can stop them." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the hallway with the phone in my lap, playing the recordings over and over until every word burned into my memory. My tears dried into something else, something sharper. Rage. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I gathered the phone, Sophie's handwritten notes, yes, she'd been writing down things she overheard, like dates and names, and marched to the police station. Detective Marissa Grant met me in her office. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a calm voice that made me feel like maybe I wasn't drowning after all. I laid everything on her desk, the phone, the recordings, the notes scrawled in Sophie's uneven handwriting. She listened to one clip, eyebrows raised. Then another. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. "This is substantial. Will it help?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Can you get my money back?" She sighed. "Maybe not all of it. But this changes everything. He's not just some random boyfriend. He sounds practiced. Professional. And if your daughter's notes are accurate about the places he mentioned, Vegas, Tampa, we might be dealing with a career con artist." A chill ran through me. "So Rachel, she's just a pawn," Detective Grant finished for me. "But she's still responsible. Don't mistake that." I nodded, my stomach twisting. I wanted to cling to the idea that Rachel was just manipulated, but hearing her voice on those recordings, agreeing, sobbing but not stopping him, it was a betrayal I couldn't rationalize away. Detective Grant copied the files, thanked me, and promised they would act quickly. But as I walked out of that station, Sophie's small hand in mine, I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth clawing its way to the surface, carried there by an 8-year-old who had seen what I refused to see. That night, Sophie looked at me across the dinner table, her fork clutched in her hand like a little warrior's sword. "Did I do the right thing, Mom?" My throat tightened. "You did more than the right thing. You saved us." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her macaroni. For her, it was simple. Right and wrong. Good and bad. For me, it was a jagged mess of love, betrayal, and guilt. But one thing was clear, Ethan's mask was slipping. And thanks to Sophie, I finally had the weapons to rip it off completely. Detective Marissa Grant didn't waste time. 2 days after Sophie and I handed her the recordings, she called me into her office. Her tone was clipped, urgent. "We've confirmed your suspicions. Ethan Cross doesn't exist." I blinked at her, trying to absorb the words. "What do you mean?" She slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were mugshots, different hairstyles, beards, even glasses, but the same cold eyes stared back at me. "His real name is Daniel Wilcox. 43 years old. He's been using aliases for nearly 2 decades. Credit card fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and," she hesitated, her pen tapping the folder, "several outstanding warrants across Nevada, Arizona, and Florida. He's slippery. Changes identities like other people change shirts." I felt my stomach plummet. I had suspected he was bad news, but seeing his face printed under the words "wanted in 3 states" sent an icy rush through my veins. "And Rachel?" I asked, my throat tight. Detective Grant's expression softened slightly. "So far, she's just listed as an accomplice. If she cooperates, we can treat her as a manipulated participant. But she's complicit, Elena. She knew enough." My chest tightened. I didn't want to hear that, didn't want to face the truth that my own sister had chosen him, and his schemes, over me. Over Sophie. Over everything. Detective Grant leaned forward. "The recordings your daughter made are gold. Especially the ones where Wilcox admits he targeted your accounts. We can build a case. But we need more. We need to find them before they disappear again." "How?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She gave a thin smile. "By following the money." The investigation moved fast after that. I learned more about Daniel Wilcox than I ever wanted to know. He had a pattern: sweep into a woman's life, usually someone vulnerable or generous, charm her, isolate her, then siphon off whatever resources he could before vanishing. Rachel wasn't the first. She might not even be the last. Police tracked purchases on my stolen funds, hotel bookings, flashy dinners, even a rental car trail. It all pointed to Nevada. Las Vegas, specifically. Of course. The city of illusions, where people disappear as easily as smoke. Meanwhile, Sophie kept surprising me with the details she had collected. "He talked about a hotel once," she said one night while coloring at the kitchen table. "Something with gold lights." I wrote it down. She handed me a crumpled piece of paper where she'd scrawled MGM. When I gave it to Detective Grant, she nodded. "That matches a card charge from your account last week. Your daughter has instincts that put grown detectives to shame." I looked at Sophie, pride swelling in my chest even as my heart ached. She was too young for this, too young to carry the weight of catching criminals. But without her, we would have been helpless. It happened on a Friday. Detective Grant called at 3 a.m., her voice electric. "We've got them. MGM Grand. Room 2187. We're moving in now." I jolted awake, heart pounding. Sophie stirred beside me in bed. We'd been sleeping together since the theft, both of us too anxious to be apart. "Is it Aunt Rachel?" she mumbled. "Yes," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "They found her." We waited, the minutes stretching like hours, until my phone buzzed again. This time, Grant's voice was triumphant. "We've got Wilcox in custody. Rachel too. We recovered $20,000 in cash in the room, plus jewelry and electronics we believe were purchased with your funds. The rest," her sigh carried across the line. "It's gone. Gambled, spent, laundered. You'll likely never see it again." I thanked her, my words tangled with tears. Relief and grief twisted together, an unbearable knot. Part of me wanted to celebrate that he was caught. Another part wanted to scream at the loss, the $50,000 that would never come back, the dreams it had represented. The following week, I was allowed to see Rachel. She sat in a cold interview room, her wrists chained, her eyes swollen from crying. I had imagined this moment countless times, what I would say, how I would demand answers. But when I walked in, all I felt was hollow. She looked at me like a child again, despite the orange jumpsuit. "Elena," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't know it would go this far. My hands clenched into fists. "You knew enough. You took everything, Rachel. Everything I worked for. Sophie's future. Our security. My trust." She shook her head frantically. "He made me, Elena. He knew things about me, things from Tampa. He said he'd expose me if I didn't help." I frowned. "Tampa?" Her gaze darted away. "I made mistakes. Before him. I blackmailed someone, a married man. He gave me money to stay quiet. Ethan, Daniel, found out. He said if I didn't help him, he'd tell everyone." I was scared. My chest burned. "So you sold me out instead." Her sobs filled the room. I didn't know what to do. I thought he loved me. I thought. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the concrete floor. "You thought wrong. And you destroyed me in the process." In the days that followed, prosecutors built their case. The recordings Sophie made became the backbone of the evidence. Daniel Wilcox, Ethan Cross, was charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Rachel was offered a deal: testify against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. 18 months in prison. When Detective Grant explained it to me, I felt my stomach twist. 18 months for stealing $72,000, for breaking my heart, for dragging Sophie into her web of lies? It felt too little. But Grant reminded me, her testimony could be the difference between Wilcox serving 3 years or 12. "We need her." So I nodded, swallowing the rage that threatened to choke me. The night after the arrests, Sophie crawled into my lap, her small body warm against mine. "So Aunt Rachel's going to jail?" she asked. "Yes, baby. And Ethan too? His real name is Daniel." "And yes, him too." She was quiet for a long time, tracing circles on my arm with her finger. Then she whispered, "Does this mean we're safe now?" Her question sliced through me. Safe. I used to think safety was something I could build with savings accounts and locked doors. But safety, I realized, was more fragile than that. I kissed the top of her head. "We're safer than before," I said softly, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Because even with Ethan behind bars, the betrayal lingered. And Rachel's tears in that interview room haunted me, not because I believed her excuses, but because part of me still remembered the little girl I had raised, the one who once promised she'd repay me someday. She had repaid me, with devastation. And yet, against all reason, a small, stubborn part of me still hoped she might one day mean those words again. When Detective Grant first mentioned Tampa, it felt like someone had slipped ice water down my spine. Rachel had blurted it out in that interview room, almost as if she couldn't stop herself, and since then the word gnawed at me. Tampa. A city I'd only ever passed through once on a layover. For Rachel, though, it was more than a place. It was a secret. A weapon Ethan, or Daniel, as I had to force myself to call him now, used to chain her to his schemes. I didn't want to know. God, I wanted to shut my ears and keep pretending her betrayal was simple: money stolen, trust broken, end of story. But the truth had claws, and once it started scratching, I couldn't ignore it. Detective Grant laid it out with clinical calm. "Your sister was involved in a blackmail case 2 years ago," she explained as we sat in her office. The blinds were half closed, slicing sunlight into sharp little bars across her desk. "A married businessman. She threatened to expose an affair unless he paid her to keep quiet. He wired her tens of thousands. She never reported it, of course, but Daniel found out. He used it as leverage. I sank back in the chair, my pulse thudding in my ears. So she wasn't just some innocent woman he manipulated. She was already playing dirty. Grant gave a small nod. It doesn't excuse what Daniel did. But it explains her compliance. He dangled her own guilt over her head. People will do almost anything to keep their secrets buried. The words lodged in me like splinters. Rachel hadn't just stumbled into a conman's arms, she had already been standing in the shadows. My little sister, the girl I'd raised like a daughter, had chosen deception long before Ethan Cross ever appeared. When I confronted her about it in county jail, she didn't even try to deny it. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands cuffed, and her voice cracked as she whispered, "I was desperate, Elena. You had your job, your house, your daughter. I had nothing." He was going to leave his wife anyway, I just sped it up. I wanted to scream. My hands gripped the edge of the metal table so tightly my knuckles ached. "You had me, Rachel. You always had me. I gave up my life so you could have one. And this is what you did with it?" Her face crumpled. "I hated needing you all the time. I hated feeling like I was just your project. You don't know what it's like to be the younger one, always standing in your shadow." Her words stung, because I knew the truth buried inside them. I had been the responsible one, the fixer, the stand-in parent. She had been the child who never got to grow without me hovering, sacrificing, shaping. But instead of gratitude, she carried resentment like a stone in her chest. "You could have talked to me," I said, my voice low, ragged. "Instead, you let him tear us apart." Rachel's tears slid silently down her face. I thought if I helped him, if I got free of the guilt in Tampa, I could finally start over. I never meant for it to go this far. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. It always goes this far. Lies don't stop where you want them to. They keep eating until there's nothing left. She reached for me, the chains clinking, but I pulled back. Her touch used to comfort me. Now it burned. The district attorney, Claudia Rivera, didn't sugarcoat things when I met her the following week. She was sharp-eyed, brisk, and carried herself like a woman who had seen every excuse in the book. "Your sister's confession about Tampa actually strengthens our case against Wilcox," she said, flipping through a stack of papers. "It proves he had leverage over her. That helps us show coercion, which we need for her plea deal." "What deal?" I asked cautiously. Rivera looked up. 18 months in prison if she testifies. She'll be required to pay restitution on top of that, though realistically, you may only see a fraction. But her cooperation means Wilcox could serve more than a decade. Without her, we risk him walking in 3 to 5. I pressed my hands together, fighting the urge to cry again. "So she betrays me, and the reward is a lighter sentence." "It's not about rewarding her," Rivera said firmly. "It's about making sure the real predator is locked away. Your sister made her choices. But Wilcox is the one who built a career out of destroying people like you. People like me." I hated that phrase. It made me feel small, foolish, like a category of gullible women whose trust was a commodity. Still, I nodded. "Do what you have to do." At home, Sophie absorbed everything with the eerie calm she always carried. She was coloring at the kitchen table when I told her about Aunt Rachel's deal. "So she's going to jail, but not forever?" Sophie asked, carefully filling in the petals of a daisy with yellow. "Not forever," I admitted. "She'll testify against Ethan, Daniel, and then she'll serve her time." Sophie frowned, her small brow furrowed. "And then what? She comes back like nothing happened?" Her bluntness startled me. "No," I said quickly. "Things will never be the same." She looked up at me, her green eyes piercing. "Then you have to decide, Mom. Do you still want her in your life? Because if you do, she'll hurt you again." Out of the mouths of children, the truth always lands hardest. I couldn't answer her. Not yet. The night before Rachel's first pretrial hearing, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Sophie's breathing was steady in the next room. The house felt safe, but my chest ached with a grief I couldn't name. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even just about the betrayal. It was about the girl I had raised, the one who once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who wore my old sweaters like they were treasures, who whispered that she'd pay me back someday. I couldn't reconcile her with the woman who had blackmailed a stranger in Tampa and drained my accounts dry for a conman's promise. I didn't know which version of her was real. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But I knew this: the courtroom would force the truth out, whether I wanted to hear it or not. And when Rachel took that stand against Ethan Cross, Daniel Wilcox, I would have to decide if I still had a sister at all. When the dust settled after the arrests, I thought relief would wash over me. Instead, there was only exhaustion, like I had been holding my breath for months and now couldn't remember how to exhale. The money was gone. That fact sat on my chest every morning when I opened my banking app and saw numbers that looked like a cruel joke. Of the $72,000 I had scraped together over years of sacrifice, only $20,000 had been recovered. Just enough to remind me of what I'd lost, never enough to make me feel secure again. I scrambled. I cut every expense I could, worked extra hours, and told Sophie we'd have to skip our usual Saturday ice cream outings. She didn't complain, she never did, but the way her face fell when she heard it broke me more than any empty bank account. And yet, life didn't collapse entirely. Friends from work brought casseroles, offered to watch Sophie when I needed overtime. My boss quietly advanced me part of my bonus to help cover bills. Neighbors slipped envelopes into my mailbox with grocery store gift cards. Every gesture felt like a hand pulling me back from the edge. Sophie, too, adapted with a resilience that humbled me. She proudly told her teacher that she had helped catch a bad guy. She drew little comics of herself as a detective, complete with a magnifying glass and a cape. Sometimes I caught her watching me with this steady, grown-up gaze, like she was making sure I wouldn't break apart. But at night, when the house was dark, the doubts came flooding in. I replayed every moment I ignored Sophie's warnings, every time I overlooked the red flags with Rachel, every dollar I had believed was safe. I lay awake, my body buzzing with insomnia, convinced that if I blinked, someone else would steal what little I had left. Then came the phone call. It was late, close to midnight, when the jail collect line buzzed on my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me couldn't. I pressed accept. Elena, Rachel's voice came through, hoarse and desperate. Please. Just listen. I sat in silence, my knuckles white around the phone. They're transferring me soon, she rushed on. I don't know if I'll get another chance. I need to see you. One last time. Please. Every instinct screamed to hang up. To let her rot in the choices she had made. But another part of me, the part that still remembered tucking her in at night, the part that still wanted to believe she could be better, hesitated. Against my better judgment, I whispered, one visit. That's all. When I hung up, my stomach twisted with dread. I didn't know if I was walking toward closure or another wound. But I knew this much: I needed to look her in the eye, to hear her say why. Because only then could I begin to stitch together the pieces of myself she had shattered. Walking into the prison felt like stepping into another world, one that hummed with a low, oppressive energy I could feel in my bones. The clanging doors, the metallic echo of footsteps, the sharp fluorescent lights overhead, it was all designed to remind you that freedom was on the other side of thick walls you couldn't breach. The guard led me into a sterile visiting room lined with tables and bolted-down chairs. I sat, hands clenched in my lap, my heart hammering so loudly I thought it might echo. I told myself this was for closure. One visit, like I'd promised. No forgiveness. No excuses. Just the truth. Then she appeared. Rachel shuffled in wearing the dull orange jumpsuit, her wrists shackled to a chain around her waist. She looked smaller than I remembered, her once glossy hair tied back into a limp ponytail, her face pale and blotchy. She wasn't the Rachel who used to float into my kitchen in heels, laughing, or the Rachel who had stolen my life savings with a practiced smile. She looked like a girl who had run out of masks to wear. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, we both froze. "Elena," she breathed, sliding into the chair across from me. Her hands trembled as she set them on the table. "Thank you for coming." I wanted to spit out all the words I had rehearsed: anger, accusations, the list of everything she had ruined. But when I opened my mouth, only one came out: why? Tears filled her eyes instantly. Because I was stupid. Because I was angry. Because I wanted to stop feeling like your responsibility and start feeling like someone's equal. Her voice cracked. "Ethan, Daniel, he made me feel like that, at least at first. Like I wasn't just your shadow. Like I could matter." Her words hit me in the chest. She wasn't excusing herself, not fully, but she was naming something I had never admitted aloud. My love for her, my sacrifices, had always carried an unspoken weight. I was the caretaker, and she was the cared for. She had grown up under that shadow, and I had never stopped to see how it felt for her. "I didn't force you to steal from me," I said sharply, though my voice trembled. "No," she whispered, nodding. "That was me. I chose it. I told myself it was for us, that he was building something better. But the truth is, I resented you. Every time you helped me, I felt smaller. Like I could never stand on my own. And instead of dealing with that, I betrayed the only person who ever stood by me." Silence stretched between us. Her confession was raw, but I didn't know if it was repentance or just another manipulation. Still, hearing her say the words, "I chose it," was something I hadn't expected. Rachel leaned forward, her cuffed hands scraping the table. "I'm sorry, Elena. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know, it wasn't about Sophie. I would never hurt her. She broke off, her shoulders shaking. I was weak. My throat ached as I forced the words out. Weakness doesn't excuse destroying your family." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I agreed to testify. I can't fix what I've done, but maybe I can stop him from doing it to someone else." For the first time in months, I saw something in her face that didn't look like excuses. It looked like shame. Real shame. I sat back, my chest tight. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. I don't even know if I want you in my life when you get out. But I needed to hear you say it was yours. Not his. Yours." Rachel nodded, tears dripping onto the table. "It was mine." The guard's voice broke the moment. "Time's up." Rachel looked at me one last time, her expression a strange mix of grief and gratitude. "Tell Sophie I love her. Even if she never wants to see me again." I stood, my legs trembling, and walked away without answering. As the doors clanged shut behind me, I felt lighter in a way I hadn't expected. Not healed. Not whole. But lighter. Because for the first time, Rachel had stopped blaming the world, or me, or Ethan. She had owned her choices. And that small crack in her armor gave me the faintest flicker of hope that maybe, someday, the sister I once knew could claw her way back from the ruins. The trial was brutal, not because the outcome was uncertain, but because watching Rachel on the stand was like holding a mirror to all the years I'd tried to pretend we were whole. She sat there in her jumpsuit, voice trembling, recounting every detail of Ethan's, Daniel's, scheme. The recordings Sophie had made were played for the jury, Rachel's own sobs echoing through the speakers. I wanted to cover Sophie's ears, but she sat still beside me, her small hand gripping mine with quiet strength. When the verdict came, it was almost anticlimactic. Daniel Wilcox, alias Ethan Cross, was sentenced to 12 years. 12 years of cells, shackles, and walls he couldn't charm his way out of. Rachel, true to the deal, was sentenced to 18 months. She began restitution from the moment she stepped into prison work detail, earning pennies on the dollar, but the symbolism mattered more than the sums. It was proof she couldn't wriggle away from accountability. At first, I ignored her letters. They came once a month, messy handwriting sprawled across lined paper, filled with apologies, prayers, and promises to do better. I left them unopened on my dresser, too afraid of what I might feel if I read them. But Sophie asked one day, her eyes curious, "Has Aunt Rachel written to you?" "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Can I read one?" Something in her voice, calm, cautious, older than her years, made me hand over the most recent envelope. She read it carefully, her lips moving as she whispered the words. Then she looked up at me and said, "She sounds different. Sad, but honest. Maybe she really means it." For Sophie's sake, I started opening the letters. Slowly, reluctantly, I replied. "Just a few lines at first. I don't know if I can forgive you. But I hear you." By the time Rachel was released, Sophie was 10. We agreed to supervised visits at first, public places, short meetings. The first time Rachel walked into that cafe, her hair grown out and her face lined with something I'd never seen before, humility. I didn't know whether to cry or to leave. But Sophie ran to her, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "Don't mess this up again." Rachel smiled through tears. "I won't." It wasn't redemption. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a start, a fragile bridge built on splintered wood and tentative hope. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the bond we once had wasn't gone forever. Just scarred. 3 years later, the scars are still there, but they've faded into something I can live with. Rachel never became the sister I once dreamed she'd be, but she became something else, accountable. She still works a modest job, still sends restitution checks every few months, each one a small reminder that debts don't just vanish. And this time, I don't let my guard down. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a boundary, a choice I make each day to let her inch closer without forgetting where the line is. Some family members still grumble that I'm too harsh, others that I'm too soft. But their voices don't matter anymore. What matters is Sophie. She's 11 now, sharp-eyed and resilient, still reminding me that children see truths adults refuse. She is my compass, my proof that love can survive betrayal and still grow stronger. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They are protection. And I've finally learned how to build them. Has a child's simple truth ever shattered the illusions adults tried to hold on to? Share it below. I want to hear your experiences. And if this story of betrayal, loss, and hard-won healing resonates, please like and subscribe. Thank you for being part of my journey. Remember, even the deepest wounds can teach us how to rise stronger, if we dare to face them.